Far from seeing any step forward for the rights of men in Australia in 2024, any kind of post-Me Too, oops, we may have gone a bit too far, sorry, kind of reckoning, 2024 has seen feminists in our governments, bureaucracies and judiciary really take their activism to a new level. Men's rights activist Bettina Arndt writes that all it took was a little lobbying of politicians to get draconian legislation pushed through various state parliaments around the concept of coercive control, and that has resulted in unproven domestic violence accusations absolutely flooding our criminal law system. But domestic violence accusations are being abused to later get better results in family law court hearings. It's a problem that is resulting in fathers being alienated from their kids without a leg to stand on, and it needs an immediate fix. Bettina published an article recently focusing on shocking claims by 2 Queensland police whistleblowers and many others that she's received off the record, that they are being forced to enforce the law in a completely sexist manner that's biased in favour of women. While that used to be a problem before, now it's an even bigger one because of a trend that's seen a spike in women making false accusations or exaggerated accusations against men simply to get better results later in family court hearings. One Queensland police officer wrote to Bettina saying, "I saw something today that sickened me. A man came to the station after receiving a phone call asking him to attend a police station. He genuinely had no idea what it was all about. His wife had made a private application for a domestic violence protection order, DVO, which had been heard in court and a DVO put in place. He knew nothing about this." The police officer then goes on to say this about the man. He was visibly shaken, his eyes filled with tears. He quietly said, "I'm sorry, I'm having trouble processing this." "I advised him he urgently needed to seek professional legal advice," said the police officer. "He was struggling not to break down and cry." The order had many conditions. He's not allowed back into his home, even though his office and work equipment is there. He can't contact his wife nor his 2 children except through a solicitor. I read the wife's application. The short version is that she wants to end the marriage and the man is having trouble accepting this. They had an argument over the fact that she's tearing his whole world apart, where he's alleged to have behaved badly, pointing his finger in her face and yelling, "I effing hate you." He then kicked over a watering can and the water went onto his wife's legs. Police attended and suggested that he should go and stay somewhere else, at least for a few days. The police officer's letter says, he left the home and a few days later told his wife he planned to return to their home. She told him he couldn't come back. She was terrified of him. Then she lodged the DVO application, based solely on what she says happened, no other evidence. I guarantee that this is going to get a lot of mileage in the upcoming family court matters. The police officer's letter to Bettina then goes on to say that, judging by the demeanour of the guy, I think it is unlikely that he is a hothead or violent. This matter stinks of a setup by the wife's solicitor. It is a malicious strategic move that was carefully planned and executed. Sure, I think it's very likely that he did what she said he did, pointed and yelled at her and kicked over the watering can. I absolutely do not condone his behaviour. But my God, the consequences are so out of proportion. He'll probably never get to spend time with his children again because her solicitor is now armed with this DVO, with him given no opportunity to prove his side of the story. The family law court will not give a flying you-know-what about the circumstances and how it came to be. Here is the smoking gun that shows that he is violent and controlling and potentially abusive to the children. I know that he is absolutely screwed and I feel sick to the core. Bettina Arndt is with us on the other side. Bettina, this officer's words are biting, but this is typical of the sort of stuff you're now seeing all the time, right?
Right across Australia, this is happening. I hear from police every week who are really unhappy about what's happening there. And so they're reluctant enforcers of unjust laws, and they know it. They know that if they go into a home and they assess it, that as the woman having been the one who was initiating the violence, that the chances are that even if they tried to get her charged, they wouldn't be successful. Our laws are being set up in such a way that you're not even allowed, the police aren't even allowed to do a proper investigation and make a decision for themselves. They have to look at who is most in need of protection.
Right.
That's the latest change in the Queensland laws, meaning even if you, one of the policemen gave the example of, seeing a woman bashing into the partner's windscreen of his car, breaking it. And even if you went in and saw that, you couldn't conclude she was the violent one, because you'd still have to decide she was smaller than him, and therefore she was, firstly, what had driven her to it? He must have done something to make her behave like that, and she was the one most in need of protection.
Now, you actually interviewed 2 Queensland police officers for your podcast recently, and you disguised their voices and names, just calling them Paul and Lisa. And Paul was the officer who wrote you that letter that I read out. Let's just have a quick listen to some of what he said to you in the podcast.
I do acknowledge that there is a problem with domestic violence in society, and we need to deal with it. But it deeply concerns me that it's become a gender-driven issue, that it's pushed on us, that is always males that are perpetrating domestic violence and the males must be sorted out. I find that incredibly disturbing and upsetting, and it's incredibly unjust. Mm-hmm. To be honest with you, the thing that upsets me the most is, in the end, the consequence that I see that's most destructive is that fathers are often alienated from their children through the use of domestic violence orders. Mm-hmm. The orders become so powerful and have such a strong effect on men and on proceedings through the family law courts that men often find themselves in the position where the courts are saying, well, we're not sure that we should grant you permission to see your children. That's the ultimate injustice of it.
So fathers are being alienated by these DVOs, and Bettina, we've talked about this in the past. The fact of the matter is that the legal system has become quite corrupted around this. We've got family law solicitors actually advising women to make complaints, exaggerate complaints, even make false complaints, in order to get a better result later in court when it comes to child custody and other matters related to the divorce.
Mm-hmm. And they can use really trivial examples. We heard, kicking over the watering can or yelling at a woman. A woman can say, I was afraid he would do something. You don't even have to have alleged he'd done something. Just simply fear can be enough to get a violence order. And then that carries enormous weight in family law proceedings. The Albanese government has a bill in place and going through Parliament to give even more of the assets, the family assets, to the domestic violence victim. So if she gets that violence order, she gets more of the assets. I mean, it's just incredible how we're incentivizing false allegations.
Yeah, well, there were 2 police officers that you actually spoke to. The other one was a female officer named Lisa. And she says she's seen abuse of domestic violence claims and orders for later benefit in family court. Exactly the same thing we're just talking about. She's seen that as well.
This man, he was guilty until proven innocent. And I'm sorry, but I always thought that in our country, it was the other way around.
Yeah.
You are innocent until proven guilty. And with the extreme amount of impact that this can have on people's lives, I don't understand why it's being used so flippantly, why people are being allowed to use it as a weapon against their partners.
Do we need to outlaw and have penalties for lawyers who act in such an irresponsible manner? I mean, it's disgusting that we can't trust sworn legal officers in our nation to do the right thing, but this is happening a little too often. Should it be a crime to coerce a client into making an exaggerated or false claim against a spouse?
Yeah, we're actually looking into that and whether we can do something to punish, as you say, to have some sort of penalty for lawyers who give that sort of advice. Certainly they shouldn't be giving that sort of advice, but how we follow that through is another question. We're also looking at this whole system stinks. I mean, this is not the way our law is supposed to operate, that you can make an allegation with no evidence, which ultimately ends up with the man being put in jail. Because if he breaches that order, he could be sent to jail. how is this possible in a system where you're supposed to have evidence of a criminal offence? So there are possible legal remedies, legal avenues to challenge this whole system, and that we've got some very serious lawyers looking at that as well.
Now, that policewoman herself was in a violent marriage, and she was a domestic violence victim herself. She had a husband with a mental illness and had to get herself out of a difficult situation. So she totally gets the risks. Here's a little more of what Lisa said.
I'm not concerned about women in relationships that are violent. I'm concerned about people in relationships that are violent. People are, and that is the biggest issue that I have with the way that things are these days, is that it's so gender biased. There's the investigation process is almost being taken away from us. It's not the person that needs protection, it's the person that we're going to look better for protecting.
So she's saying that they're not rewarded for looking after the person that needs protecting, but only the person that'll look better for the police force and the government to say that they're protecting, which is almost always the woman, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's worrying that we had to disguise those voices. I know it's a bit difficult to hear them, but that says something to me too. These police are too nervous to speak out openly. And most of the police even people who've retired for 15 years will say to me, I don't dare talk publicly about this. What does that say about our system? That to tell the truth about what's happening in our justice system means you put yourself at risk of what? The police say they risk of being locked up themselves, of false allegations being made against them, which end up with them being imprisoned. Everybody knows this is happening right through the system.
Okay, one last clip of Lisa from your interview I want to play. Here she is describing a situation where she and a partner were called to a job after a complaint from a woman. They arrived to find the husband pretty badly scratched up, yet very reluctant to talk about it. But when Lisa explained to him that if he didn't talk, then all that they would have to go on was what the woman said, then he finally opened up.
It got to the point where she was scratching him and digging into him and causing him injuries. And where it came to a head was he's pushed her and said, it was something like, get away from me, bitch. Oh, great, of course. But if somebody's scratching and assaulting and hurting me, I'm probably going to use more colourful language. But he just pushed her away, called her a bitch, and so she called police.
And what happened then?
So what happened is, from the investigation that I conducted, because in my opinion I conducted a holistic investigation, I determined that he was the person that was in need of protection. He was the person that needed to have a domestic violence order taken out to protect him. So I took her into custody. And the look of shock and horror on her face, and she literally said to me, but I called you, like that would make a difference. She was the person who had caused harm and violence and fear and threats to this man who was just trying to live, trying to do his thing.
Yeah.
That's pretty awful stuff. But Bettina, how do these cases usually pan out when police officers do apprehend the woman and try to protect the male?
Oh, it's interesting. I mean, it depends. Sometimes you can get a violence order against a woman, but I've heard of cases where police have had prepared the evidence on that sort of case, gone before a magistrate, and the magistrates have refused to accept it and turned it around and charged the man, and convicted the man. I mean, the magistrates are another story altogether. They're under such pressure to keep their heads down, to never attract any public attention and of course their biggest fear is that something happens to a woman who asks for a violence order and then, wasn't given.
Yeah.
And then they get, absolutely demolished.
Yeah.
And so magistrates uniformly are complying with this unjust system. I mean, from beginning to end, the men are up against it.
Yeah. Okay, now all of this has been greatly amplified by these new coercive control laws that are being brought into almost every state by Labor governments across Australia. This is where it no longer needs to be physical violence that's at the heart of the problem, but just manipulation and control of a psychological nature. But wouldn't that be a negative for women perpetrators more, Bettina?
Well, it would if the laws were just, but they're setting up. I mean, I've mentioned, I think, to you before, David, the funny thing is, we're going to introduce these laws in New South Wales a couple of years ago, and then women's groups got nervous that women would be misidentified as perpetrators, and they held the whole thing up. They didn't roll it out for at least a year while they got police officers, female police officers, into police stations across the state to teach police to only charge men. And that is the way the law has been framed, and that's the very clear rule. The police know they have to only charge males. I mean, they can try to buck the system. I mean, interesting talking to police, because they will say, if I wanted to charge a woman, I'll be up against it. I'll have to, my superiors will put me through the ring, whatever the word is, Really make me jump all sorts of hoops. I'd have to justify an enormous amount of paperwork, and you get a reputation for doing the wrong thing as a police officer.
Yeah. So it's really two-tier policing by gender. I mean, we've got one set of policing for men, one set of policing for women, different standards, two-tier policing, as they say. In the UK, they're talking about between the left and the right in the UK, or the woke and the not woke. But here it seems to be between male and female, right? That we've got this two-tier policing. It's quite scary stuff. We're going to be talking to Rob McMullen, a natural law expert, in the next segment of our show about the connection, I guess, between gender and politics, right and left and male and female. It's quite interesting. But it's fascinating stuff. Bettina, thanks very much for your time. A quick plug I know you want to give for your organisation and the great work that you do and you continue to do. It's amazing, really, your energy and that conference and how you keep the fight up with very little support. But on behalf of Men of Australia, I think I could say thank you for your work. Tell us a little bit about how people can get to you and see things.
Well, I have a website, and that will give you links to other things. I mean, the most important thing I would like people to follow is, firstly, my Substack. It's a big platform of writers called Substack, and if you put in my name at Substack, you'll find my blog, and that's where I'm not only exposing what is happening in Australia to men, but also calling for help with various campaigns I'm running. This political campaign I want to run for the next election, all sorts of things we can do to change the current dire situation for men and boys in this country. So please look at Substack. My blogs are free. I'm putting up more. I stopped doing YouTubes for a while. I'm now back into them, and I'll probably set up a new podcast very soon, because I'm having so many people coming to me. I'm just about to interview police investigator, police prosecutor, who was in the system for about 20 years, and he's telling me all his stories. Every week I have people coming from all over Australia wanting to talk about what's going on, and I can't resist exposing some of that to the general public.
Yeah, well, it's depressing to have to, and receiving all that, it's like you get overwhelmed and you want to help, but there's only so much that you can do, and you do a lot, and we really do appreciate it. Bettina Arndt, thank you very much. Have a wonderful Christmas, Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah, wonderful festive season, and we'll catch you next year on the show.
You too, David. Thanks so much for letting me on the show. It's pretty rare these days. I've been pretty much cancelled by mainstream media, and I do appreciate you giving me a voice.
If you have a Netflix or other streaming media account from a global company and you're on holidays and log in from another country, you may have noticed that shows that are available in those other countries are different. That's because different media companies have different deals with different streaming services in different countries. Imagine being able to log into Netflix, though, as if you were in America, or maybe a country that speaks a language other than English that you speak, to access more shows, but you can do it all without leaving your couch here in Australia. Well, there is a way. There is a way. Private Internet Access VPN is a virtual private network. You download their app onto your phone, your TV, your computer, whatever you use, and it'll route your data through a different server location. Not only can you access more content, but a VPN keeps you safe and secure and your family safe so that you can't be tracked by prying eyes of big government and big corporations. And it will not massively slow down your internet speeds or make it harder to use your devices like some other VPNs do. Private Internet Access, PIA VPN. It's quick and easy to install, and once you've downloaded it, that is pretty much it. And the great news is if you sign up for PIA VPN, you are also helping the other side heaps and getting great value for money as well. And you can sign up using our special Other Side code for less than $3 a month. That's a whopping 83% off the normal price, and you'll get the first 4 months free. Just go to piavpn.com/otherside right now to get our special deal. That's piavpn.com/otherside. If you like that clip, there's more where that came from in our full show, The Other Side. You can watch it right here, the latest episode. And please subscribe to our channel by pressing the subscribe button right here or down here. And remember to click that notification bell too. It all helps. Join us and become part of The Other Side.